So what's up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel. And this video is going to be a continuation of my aspect configuration series. So in my previous video, I said I was going to do a video about the Grand Trine, but I have been moved to do a video about the Grand Cross instead, and how that manifests and what it represents. So a grand cross is an aspect that involves at least 4 planets or points in the chart, and these planets are forming 4 squares and 2 oppositions. So it is a very dynamic and challenging aspect pattern configuration. So before I get into a grand cross, I'm going to break down what a square means and what an opposition means, so that way we can get a better look at how they come together and impact the native. So a square is a aspect, and we know aspect is just the relationship between 2 planets. It's how they exchange energy with each other. So I got my notes and shit right here. So a square is a dynamic aspect of frustration, tension, and conflict, and typically it leads to some type of action being taken, because these planets are squared off, and when you have that going on, it's like something has to give, if you know what I mean. And squares are what motivate us. Even though it's a hard aspect, it motivates us to get up and seek and act in order to achieve some type of relief, because squares are very challenging, and it's not something that you just want to let sit there and manifest, because it's just going to be very uncomfortable. So a lot of times we try to act on it, and if you're not conscious about how you're acting on it, then you're going to just continue to create more conflict, because the square is essentially about conflict, and the squares occur between planets that are 90 degrees apart. So, and squares occur between planets in the same modality. So you have your sun in Taurus, and Aquarius and Leo are going to square that energy, square that sign. So it can result in a conflict. For example, we know the sun represents our father, the moon represents our mother. So if you have sun square moon, that can show that your mother and your father were in direct conflict with each other, and that definitely had a impact on you. Now, opposition is a bit different, but it's also a hard aspect, because the opposition is involving planets that are 120 degrees apart. 180 degrees apart. They're 180 degrees apart, and it occurs between opposite signs. So that represents a polarity or a dilemma between the 2 planets. So most times we will identify with one planet in the energy it represents while projecting the other one, and that can represent extremes, or you go between extremes, or there is a lack of stability between what the 2 planets represent. So let's say you have sun opposition moon, then sun opposition moon can mean that because oppositions like to call other people in. So that could show where the sun is your father, is your mother and your father going back and forth, and so your father is bringing you in, like telling you what happened and trying to get you to take his side, and then the mother's like, no, this is what happened, you should take my side. And throughout your life or your childhood, you may identify with your father, and then at another time you may identify more with your mother. So there's this imbalance and this lack of being able to unite and have this balance. So that's what makes opposition very difficult, because it's extreme. It's one or the other. So in terms of a grand cross is a combination of 4 squares and 2 oppositions. So we know this is a very tense, dynamic aspect configuration, and it is the most challenging, in my opinion, it is the most challenging aspect within the natal chart out of all the other patterns, because there is no escape. For example, with a T-square pattern, the apex is where the energy is expressed, but with a grand cross, none of these energies are none of these planets are willing to give in or play the background or second fiddle to the other planets. They all want what they want. And when you pick this inside of a person who was born with this, they're going to be at odds with themselves, and there's going to be a lot of conflict, and they may feel like tension and stuff like that is ever present, like there's no type of resolve for them. And that's why a grand cross can be seen as a do or die aspect, because it's almost as if, the pressure is so intense that the native feels that it is their obligation, that they have to act on it. And it's like, it's either I'm going to act on it or I'm going to basically just suffer and suffer. And so that's what makes the Grand Cross challenging. Like I said, it can result in frustration and inner tension. I like to look at it as a gridlock, being in a room with four doors and you're going to each door, banging on the door, trying to get out, but there is no way out. You have to solve all these problems between each planet and get them to cooperate within your chart. So, you know, um, most times, matter of fact, every time a Grand Cross is going to manifest as some type of crisis for the native. So if it involves your personal planets such as your sun or moon or Mars, and if your ascendant is involved, then that's going to be a crisis involving your identity and how you project yourself. Um, if it is involving outer planets, then that's going to be more so about your environment and how your environment sort of triggers you in a way, and you have to learn to work with an environment that is not really in vibration with how you are as a person. So you have to learn to work with it. And so, because the Grand Cross occurs in the same modality, unless you have like a disassociative aspect, you will have a fixed Grand Cross, a mutable Grand Cross, or a cardinal Grand Cross. And so the cardinal Grand Cross is an aspect of it is a very dynamic one, because cardinal is about initiation. So with a cardinal aspect, with a cardinal Grand Cross, there may be issues with being able to put things into action. You may have all this, you may be pulled in so many different directions. You have all this energy and all this talent, even. The squares and represent talent as well. You have all this talent, but whenever you try to focus on one, and put this into action, that's when the other planet comes to show its ass and they're like, nah, I want you to focus on me and what I want. So that can be challenging. If you have a fixed Grand Cross, that is also very challenging, because a fixed Grand Cross is like you're very organized, you have these skills, and these planets, because they're in fixed signs, they're yet less likely to yield to the other planets, because fixed energy is about anchoring and staying within the same with that staying with whatever it represents. So you may have all this you may be very creative, very organized, but you have an extremely difficult time uniting this energy and manifesting it into something concrete. And in order to do so, it takes a tremendous amount of willpower. And Grand Crosses, they tend to produce people that have a strong willpower. Mutable is more so about, you're very scattered, you're very all over the place, and that's issues with communication. So when you have a Grand Cross, you may want to be wondering, how can I resolve this tension? Because if you have one, then you will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say it creates a lot of tension, a lot of it's a lot of it's a very uncomfortable thing to deal with. So I always say, look at the soft aspects that these planets are going to be receiving from other planets. So if any of your planets involved are forming a sextile or a trine with these planets, then that's going to represent a way for you to manifest that energy, because that's showing where you have like an open door, So I have a Grand Cross in my chart, so I'm gonna get into like my grand cross and how it has manifested in my life and how I have had to deal with it. So I got some notes here about it. So my grand cross is a fixed grand cross, and it does represent I would say it's more about my identity and the way I project myself into the world, because it is involving my sun, my ascendant, my midheaven, my Jupiter, and my descendant. So all of these are involved. So I have Sun square Jupiter, and Jupiter conjunct my descendant, Jupiter square my midheaven, my Sun square my descendant, Sun opposition midheaven, Sun square ascendant. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm gonna say it again. So all aspects and planets are multi-layered, meaning that they all are going to manifest in multiple different ways. So with the aspect pattern, no matter what it is, whether it's a grand cross, T-square, grand trine, stellium, it's going to produce a smorgasbord of things. And it's because we're talking about a grand cross in this video, that means that grand cross is going to show its ass in a multitude of ways. So I'm just gonna go over one example of how it has manifested in my life, because I still have a lot of drama and a lot of inner tension involving these not trying involving my grand cross, as I'm still learning to work through it. So the sun is ruling my first house via Leo, because I'm a Leo rising, and it is squaring my the sun is squaring my ascendant, so that has produced issues with my identity. Now we all know these planets represent archetypes in our life. So the sun represents my father. So my father, which is funny enough, he is a Leo, which is represented by the sun. And then my son is in the fourth house, and the fourth house is the house of the father. So, I have had conflict with my father and his role in my life, or lack thereof, and that has definitely affected other areas of my life, as evident by my son forming a square to my descendant, which deals with me attracting partners that conflict with who I am. The sun opposing my midheaven, which deals with my career aspirations, my social attitude, and how I want to portray myself into the world. And because Jupiter is involved, Jupiter is representing my belief systems, my religion, my philosophy, and Jupiter is ruling my fourth, fifth, sixth house. It is conjunct my descendant, and it's also ruling my eighth house as well. So, um, while I may not be completely conscious of it, due to my father's kind of, role in my life, it made it more difficult for me to project myself, because your father is the one that gives you your self-esteem, your confidence, your drive in life. And with what I have going on, it is very difficult for me. Like, I don't lack confidence. I'm not a insecure person by far, but I do have issues with projecting myself into the world. Especially as it pertains to my career. Like, I really had to kind of find my own way with my career and what I'm interested in. Like, I'm still obviously don't have the answers, and I'm learning, but my self-esteem was called into question. And when I first started making YouTube videos, which this is only my second video, it made me question my self-esteem, because again, Taurus is on my midheaven, and Taurus is about values and your self-esteem. And with my sun opposing my midheaven, I alternate between being this very private individual, being very much so about focused on my immediate environment, and then when it's time for me to go out into my career, due to the opposition, I kind of flip and go more towards the Taurus side of myself, which is more hedonistic, more about society values, and it just causes a lot of conflict within myself. And I also want to mention how Jupiter is involved, because Jupiter, deals with our beliefs and our religious beliefs as well, and our philosophy. I am not religious, and I come from a very religious family, so my religion is also played a part in that as well. So the partners I attract are religious, and they cause this conflict, and I don't consciously seek out that, but it's kind of how it happens, and that comes up in my relationships. My Jupiter is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is the sign of astrology, and I'm very into astrology, and so some of the people I've attracted may not. That's caused a conflict because astrology, even though it's popular, I don't think it's as mainstream. A lot of people still gonna look at it like what is that? It's just pseudoscience, which I hate that term. um, Also, um, my father, going back to my father with that Jupiter influence, the sun is really my fourth house, so my family is religious, so that's the issue with my family. My father is religious, and um, that also causes a conflict because I'm not religious. And if you know anything about Leo energy is not that receptive. It's not about seeing other people for who they are and accepting it. It's more so about, me. And I'm going to take care of my pack and take care of my tribe. But at the end of the day, I feel like my beliefs reign supreme. So, you know, that's created a lot of energy and a lot of frustration in my life. So, as I mentioned earlier, you want to look to your sextiles and your trines as means to alleviate the pressures or as a way out, so to speak. So my Jupiter is forming a sextile to my Uranus. No, it's forming a conjunction with my Uranus. It's forming a sextile to my Saturn, and Saturn is about business, and my Saturn is in the ninth house. So I have, turned my due to this grand cross I've had to, it has forced me to kind of look at all these areas of my life, and the part of that sextile to Saturn is the reason why I'm talking to you guys today, because Saturn is about business and my Saturn is in the ninth house, and it's about exploration and it's about philosophy. So me exploring my philosophy as it pertains to astrology is a nice outlet for me because it helps me confront my own issues as well as help others. Um, Also, my North Node is forming a sextile to my Sun, so that gives me opportunity to express myself, and that is part of my purpose in my life is to express myself. So all my issues are wrapped up in identity and self-expression as well. I also have my Venus forming a trine to my midheaven, which is also echoing that Sun trine sextile North Node. It's about me um having myself and my values of who I am and expressing that into the outer world with ease. Even though it was hard for me to come on camera and make these videos, it is much easier than the real issues I deal with as it pertains to that Grand Cross. So that's kind of where I want to go with it. And so all in all, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oh yeah, the houses. So you want to definitely look and see where the houses are, what houses are involved in your Grand Cross, because that's going to show where their energy is being expressed. So like I was talking about my fourth house and my 10th house and my first house, and how those are all angular houses which are very personal to us, and it represents key aspects of our life. You want to look at the houses that are involved because that's going to be where that energy is manifesting. So if it's your fourth house, that's going to be your home life, your family, your father, or also you could say your who you are deep down inside, because the fourth house is about our roots and it's about who we are at a core soul level. You know what I'm saying? So if it involves, and also the seventh house is about other people, relationships, contracts, marriage, how we relate to other people, especially. So if your grand cross is involving your descendant, such as mine, I have trouble relating to other people on a personal level. I'm very, due to my Leo ascendant, I'm naturally able to talk to other people and chop it up, but my son is forming a square with that descendant, and I'm a Scorpio, so it's hard for me to open up and really be truly vulnerable and open to other people and really let them in. It's mostly just like I don't want to say it's an act, but it's like it's like I'm keeping you at this distance, and I'm not doing that consciously, but I've become more aware of that as I become more aware of my Grand Cross. So that concludes this video. My next video is gonna be about the Grand Trine. So that is a much lighter aspect configuration than the Grand Cross. So if you have a Grand Cross or you know someone that has a Grand Cross, please comment down below and tell me how that has manifested in your life and your experience with your Grand Cross. And yeah, so yeah, thank you for watching my video.